The third mainline entry in the machine games canon of Wolfenstein has proven to be an elusive title, but despite the uncertainty and mysterious circumstances surrounding its development, we don't need to wait until the official announcement in order to speculate what the story and its gameplay mechanics may or may not be. Let's take a closer look at what the previous games have set up so far, and where the story might actually go in the third one. To begin, we should settle the biggest debate that has been going on for the past few years regarding Wolfenstein 3, and that is the time frame in which it is going to be set. Some people believe that the game will serve as a sequel to the New Colossus, taking us back to 1960s in order to fill the gaps in the overarching story. Some people believe that it will be a direct follow-up to Youngblood, continuing the events that have occurred in 1980. I believe that actually both of these answers are correct. Allow me to elaborate. The New Colossus has ended on somewhat of a cliffhanger, with the Second American Revolution being set in motion. Following that, BJ has managed to hunt down and kill Hitler off-screen, but as we found out in Youngblood, it came at a cost, that being the triggering of a doomsday scenario. The big question is, why would machine games skip over such a major event and leave it off-screen? I think that there are a couple of reasons behind this choice, the primary one being escalation. You see, the New Order has set the bar for what level of craziness the story in a Wolfenstein game could reach. It put the franchise in a brand new timeline, cranked up the human experiments to 11, added even more exotic weapons, and dropped the player on a Nazi-occupied moon. After that, each new entry in the franchise tried to outdo the previous one with things such as Hitler having his own colony on Venus, successfully decapitating the main protagonist, and the introduction of previously mentioned doomsday scenario, which is set to render Earth uninhabitable for humans. It put the writers in a difficult spot where they are likely pressured to come up with something to top all of what previous games have done, and since we already traveled through the outer space multiple times, I believe that the next item on the list would be traveling through not only space, but also time. Youngblood has revealed that the multiverse theory is real within the world of Wolfenstein, so at this point it wouldn't be much more ridiculous to introduce a way of time travel. This is partially why I think the initial death of Hitler that was mentioned in Youngblood is actually not going to end up being his final one. Wolfenstein 3 is more than likely to focus on trying to prevent the Doomsday device from annihilating the Earth, and the only way to do that would be to take it down before killing Adolf, as his death is what triggered it in the first place. Also, it is worth to mention that a historical figure such as Hitler is destined to be the final boss of the entire franchise. We as players get to enter the final boss battle only once. Besides, fighting the same boss twice would likely dilute the experience, so this is likely the reason why the story has been structured that way, and his death between the events of the New Colossus and Youngblood was left off screen. So, with all of that in mind, and I want to make it absolutely clear that this is just a speculation based on an educated guess and not a wish list, this is how I think the story of Wolfenstein 3 is possibly going to go. The game is going to pick up where we left off at the end of Youngblood, as BJ, Anya and Grace set out to rally the allies in order to stop Fourth Reich. They do so successfully by assassinating General Messler, who was mentioned at the end of Youngblood as the leader of Fourth Reich's cell in Berlin. And possibly while doing so, our gang might catch a hint of something, perhaps a piece of top-secret intel that would reveal the location of another Dati shoot vault. Not being able to afford Nazis turning the tides again, they set out to infiltrate said vault, which may contain an artifact related to God Key. This artifact could possibly enable to travel through time, but with Seth Roth being dead by then, it leaves BJ and the rest of the Resistance with very limited knowledge about how to utilize it. Because of that, let's say they couldn't travel all the way back to late 30s or early 40s in order to stop the Nazis from winning Second World War, but perhaps it would enable them to turn the time around and go back to 60s before the Doomsday device has been triggered. They pull it off successfully, meaning that the rest of the game would now be taking place in the 1960s once again. With the newly acquired knowledge, the Back to the Future BJ sets out to find what the Doomsday device is by raiding Hitler's new digs back on Earth. With the nature and location of the said device revealed, he manages to track it down and destroy it for good, finally allowing him to hunt down and re-kill Hitler and end his reign over the world. He does that, but of course Adolf won't go down without a fight, as he is likely using a mecha suit of his own, finally bringing us that rebooted mecha-Hitler fight everyone has been waiting for. Depending on what kind of an ending developers would like to leave things on, I think the game could leave the doors open for possible future installments, or end the Machine Games trilogy on a hopeful note, as the world is on the brink of being finally Nazi-free. Now, again, this is just a speculation in regards to an overarching plot. Of course, there would be more to it, especially as I think that the 1960s portion would take up majority of the game, and I'm sure we would be treated to some additional plot twists along the way. Since we have tackled that topic, let's quickly graze some other possible aspects of the game. First of all, let's talk character deaths. Someone is likely going to perish, and most likely any major deaths would occur in the 1960s portion of the game, as time travel would essentially retcon most of the stuff that happens in 80s, including Youngblood itself, which I'm sure would make a lot of people happy. Killing characters from the first game would definitely have the biggest impact, and depending on how ambitious the writers are, I think Fergus and Wyatt would be on the top of the list, with Anya being possibly a little ways down, as these three are the only remaining major characters from the New Order which see action on a regular basis. As for the rest of the cast, it is anybody's guess, but as they are mostly side and background characters, I would give them 50-50 chance of getting killed halfway through the game. Moving on to the next thing I want to touch upon, the possible hub location in Wolfenstein 3. Once again, we can assume the escalation being a major aspect here, with the first game's hub being set in a stationary place, that being the Berlin catacombs, which provided the resistance with a safe place to stay, but without an ability to move it. Later in the New Order, our gang got a hold of Eva's Hammer U-boat, which became the hub in the following game, providing them with better defenses and, most importantly, allowing them to cross the ocean and hit targets that were out of their reach beforehand. Still, being somewhat handicapped to ocean water, it wasn't perfect, but once again, by the end of the game, they took control of another enemy vessel, that being the Ausmerzer. This is what I think is going to serve as the primary hub in Wolfenstein 3. A flying fortress of this magnitude would essentially allow the resistance to travel to any place on Earth and hit any target they want. Paired with Eva's Hammer, which may still play a role as it is equipped with nuclear warheads, these two vessels could be the thing that is going to turn the tides around and give the global resistance a genuine shot at taking out the Nazis. Finally, I want to discuss a possible gimmick feature of the third game. The New Order has put a lot of emphasis on double timelines, which had some minor gameplay differences. The new Colossus has introduced contraptions, Youngblood brought Godkey abilities into the mix, and I think the third game might try to empower them even more. We already know that BJ used the Godkey to peer into another worlds, and I think that something similar could act as a gameplay element in the third game. To be specific, I am talking about an ability to possibly jump into an alternate universe, or even jump between the two timelines altogether, which would be somewhat fitting with the time travel theme we have been talking about. Such a feature is not entirely new to this franchise either, as Wolfenstein 2009's Full Medallion played a somewhat similar role. What I think Wolfenstein 3 could do is try to enhance and elaborate upon such a feature, which if done right could be a lot of fun and could not only introduce a new way of solving the in-game puzzles, but also add some replayability. I think we could look to Titanfall 2 for reference, as one of the missions in that game had featured a time travel mechanic, which showcased how cool it could be if done right. Of course, such an artifact could also come with some additional abilities, such as the bullet time from Wolfenstein 2009 or the ability to catch bullets from Youngblood. I'm sure that there will be more to it, and we are only scratching the surface of the possibilities that Wolfenstein 3 could be full of. Let me know what you think. Let's hope that we won't have to wait a decade for Machine Games to bless us with the next installment, and most importantly remember, there are a lot of things you can do with a hatchet and a Nazi.